Thank you very much. So we have had confirmation the live stream has started. So welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet. In addition to the Cabinet members and other councillors present in the room, we also have some councillors joining our meeting remotely. I'll now check that they can hear us and we them. We have, first of all, Councillor Jenny Bartlett.
Good afternoon, Leader. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Councillor John Hardwick.
Good afternoon, Leader. Yes, I can see and hear you clearly.
Councillor Alan Selden. Apologies for Alan Selden. Peter Jimman.
Yes, good afternoon, Leader, Cabinet and officers. I can hear and see you.
And we have apologies from Councillor Yolandi Watson. Going on to the group leaders and scrutiny chairs, we have Councillor Terry James.
Hi, good afternoon. I can see and hear you.
Afternoon, Councillor James. Councillor Jonathan Lester.
Yes, thank you. Apologies in advance. My internet seems to be a bit hit and miss, so it keeps coming back, but it keeps dropping out now and again. So apologies for that in advance.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Bob Matthews.
Yeah, seeing you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Tony Fagan.
Afternoon, I can see and hear you, thanks.
Very much. Councillor William Wilding, or I think probably Councillor Jimman is taking his place.
Correct.
Councillor Philip Howes has sent his apologies. And we have Councillor Alyssa Swinglehurst.
Good afternoon, Leader. I can see and hear you. Thank you.
Have I missed any councillors? So good. Okay, we also have a number of officers attending who will be introduced as they are called upon. Thank you. I'll now formally open the meeting. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and making a recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted when you're not speaking, and please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. As we move through the agenda, in addition to discussion by Cabinet members, I will invite group leaders or their representatives in turn to provide views and questions from their group on each item. Where appropriate, I will also call on scrutiny chairpersons to comment on behalf of their committee. Voting will be undertaken by a show of hands in the room, and only Cabinet members may vote. Just by way of introduction, we have 6 items on the agenda this afternoon. They are all important ones. The intention is to try to move through the agenda as quickly as possible. I've made some proposals to everyone as to how we'll try to proceed quickly through the agenda so that we're not here too late. This is a bit of a test, really, to see whether this sort of setup and timing works. So we'll see what we learn from this as we go through. I just emphasise the timings have been set down, but for any councillor who has a particularly strong will to speak on a particular item, then they should do so, speak up and say what you think is appropriate. Thank you very much. So first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Have any apologies been notified to the clerk?
Yes, Chair. I have Councillor Ellie Chance, Councillor Pauline Crockett, Councillor Anne Tyler.
Thank you very much. Any other apologies? Anybody? I've mentioned Councillor Howells. Claire Ward sends her apologies, and Kate is in her place. Declarations of interest. Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interest for items on the agenda today?
Sorry, Leader, just Ben Boswell as well. Can we put his apologies for today? He's not attending for the waste report.
Item 3, to receive any questions from members of the public. We have received 2 questions from members of the public and a response has been published as a supplement to the agenda papers. No supplemental questions have been raised. So I can pass on then to item 4, which is questions from councillors. We have received 1 question from a councillor for this meeting. A response has been published. It's in the supplemental papers. Again, no supplemental question has been submitted, but if Councillor Andrews is present, he could still ask a question. No, he's not present. Thank you very much. So we're doing well on timing so far. So item 5. So this is a really important item. Planning for a new waste management strategy, one of the biggest contracts that the council ever awards. So very important we get this right. And I'm sure some principles will come out of this about how we want to deal with waste in our county going forward. So this report is looking to approve the new integrated waste management strategy, which is detailed in Appendix A, and to authorise council officers to design and implement new waste handling pilot schemes and approve the drawdown of the waste management reserve to fund those projects. This item begins on page 9 of the agenda pack, and a supplement to make amendments to Appendix A was published on the 28th of July. So I'll pass over, if I may, to Councillor Gemma Davis.
Thank you, Leader. I'm delighted to introduce this report into the new Herefordshire Integrated Waste Strategy. You will see that a supplement has been produced to correct a number of mistakes within the report. None, I have been advised, make any material change to the report or the strategy itself. This strategy provides us with an opportunity to reflect the growing climate and ecological crisis and adhere to the upcoming Environment Bill by creating an end-to-end strategy for our waste stream. At its heart is that waste must be seen as a resource. At present, our strategy focuses on what to do with our waste. This strategy seeks to address this and prevent waste entering into the system at firstly. Our hierarchy of waste now has reduction first, then reuse, then recycle, then recover, and finally disposal. This will be through a variety of ways, including reuse cafes, recycling stores, working with charities and community groups to educate and collect goods before they enter a bin or a recycling site. Many people have asked me why we cannot stick with how we're doing it now. The simple answer is that we can't. The Environment Bill will put specific regulations on both consumers, suppliers and local authorities on what we must all do. This is not the main reason for me, however. The reason to do it differently is that it is the right thing to do for us now and for future generations for whom the decisions we make now will affect the generations to come. This will be a big change for residents, including myself. Despite what people say about councillors being incredibly wealthy, I live in a very modest 2-bedroom flat in Saxon Gate. I know only too well how difficult it can be to have lots of bins or storage containers, but it can be done, and more importantly, it must be done. I'm incredibly grateful to the Waste Task and Finish group who have been part of this process and without whom I would be lost. The same goes for the waste team who have been incredible through these huge changes. The strategy sets out a number of very ambitious targets for the council. Net zero carbon by 2030, to reduce residual household waste arising to less than 330 kgs per household per year by 2035, to achieve national, achieve national municipal reuse and recycling rate targets of 55% by 2025, 60% by 2030 and 65% by 2035. To meet the requirements of the Environment Bill, no more than 1% of municipal waste to be sent to landfill from 2025, and that will decrease down to 0 waste to landfill by 2035. And finally, improve reuse and recycling at all Hereford and Worcestershire recycling sites to achieve a reuse and recycling target of 85% by 2035. You will see the reduction. You will see the reduction to 1% of waste going to landfill by 2025, going to 0 by 2035. Some people may be confused by this and think surely we don't send any waste to landfill, but unfortunately we do. Our current contract for disposal, a joint venture with Worcestershire County Council and District Councils of Worcestershire, sent 22% of the waste they had to landfill last year alone. Any future contract must reflect our ambitions. These priority actions have been placed into an action plan for short, medium and long-term delivery. In order to ensure that this happens and ensure that we get the very best end-to-end strategy, Rachel Joy, Programme Director for Waste, has been recruited. Rachel comes with a wealth of experience regarding transformation and waste, and has also seen the very end life of waste when it's ended up in shores overseas. We welcome her to Herefordshire. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, is Rachel with us virtually?
I believe she is.
So I don't know whether Rachel or Neil Taylor, do you want to say anything in addition?
No, I don't think so. Rachel might though.
Chair, councillors, thank you. Yeah, this is an incredibly important time for Herefordshire. There are some huge challenges within this strategy and they shouldn't be underestimated. But I think it's important to remember that this is part of a national effort, and that when various changes that are proposed nationally come forward around extended producer responsibility on packaging, around end life use on a lot of the household goods we have, consistency in collection, we will begin to see national campaigns and national support around this, so that the producer pays for some of this. So I think it's important to remember that we're not alone on this. There is a long journey and many, many steps to take. So it's important that we take stock of the strategy over the next few weeks and come up with an action plan that would allow you to consider the options available to you in commissioning future services that actually produce more reuse as a result of what we do, more recycling, more composting, and less going to landfill. Thank you, Chair.
Rachel, we've got a number of experts, I think, who we're drawing into the council to deal with particular issues. What is your experience? Have you been with a number of councils? Is this your area of expertise?
I bring two areas of expertise. One is around community engagement, community transformation. So working with both Harrow and Sutton. Sutton are nationally respected in terms of their neighbourhood working as an authority. Harrow was one of Britain's most religiously diverse communities and incredibly challenging in terms of some of the issues it faced as a diverse community. So working with communities around changing behaviour, finding ways to make things easier in terms of recycling, campaigning around that behaviour change. I bring that expertise, but I also bring the expertise of managing Harrow's waste service, where we did a lot of transformational work around in-cap technology, increasing recycling levels to second highest in London. And I've also managed Sutton's waste service and taken through some various changes around composting, garden waste, and matters like that. So I bring that expertise, and while I have that expertise, I'm very, very keen to listen to you as members, because you know what happens in various parts of the county at various different times. You know the issues here, which I can align to the data I'm getting from the various research pieces that you've already done. You've built a good platform to work from, and we can take that forward together.
Rachel, that wasn't a planned question, so thank you very much for giving us that detail. It's really, really valuable, particularly about public engagement. It's so important, I think, that getting people to want to follow these policies. So over to Cabinet. I think the idea is if just two Cabinet members have any particular thoughts on that, Felicity.
Thank you very much. Yes, I have one or two comments. Well, I have lots actually, but I'll keep it very minimal. Thank you for this. It's a really comprehensive report, and there's lots of excellent stuff in it. And I particularly commend the Task and Finish group, who a whole range of really helpful comments, ideas, comments, better ways of working, a whole range of those things. So it's very encouraging. It's also good that it's meeting our concerns about climate change, biodiversity, and so on as well. So slightly at random, but there's a number of particular things I wanted to focus on. One is very much appreciate, I think it's absolutely key within the vision, this recognition that waste has a value. So if we start from that, it influences the way we look at everything we're going to be doing. So I think that's very important. Second one is this focus on keeping it local. I think one of the frustrations many of us have had is the transportation of waste over very long distances. So unnecessary. We should be able to deal with it at a local level, and that's much more environmentally friendly as well. All the suggestions, the whole, how do we call it, the line of how we work, reducing waste in both place onto reuse, repair and so on. I mean, these are ideas that have been around for decades. I think many of us are very familiar with them and very frustrated that they haven't been picked up and implemented by councils. Lots of very interesting voluntary initiatives in many parts of the country. So a couple of other things. I think the real focus on a clear end use will help in our working with the communities and encouraging people. In fact, I think actually the public's very much with us. They are very, very keen on the whole that we do work sensibly on waste. The actual putting all that into action and encouraging and supporting their role in this will be rather more difficult. So it's interesting to hear from Rachel and her experience on this, very important. I'm glad to see that we are talking about community, voluntary initiatives. Charity shops are a classic one. There are already lots of ways that waste or potential waste is being diverted, and that's an obvious example. There was a time when there were positive benefits. I remember, I don't know what they're called now, but the council gave a credit to voluntary organisations who were dealing with paper waste, for example. So schools who collected waste were getting a credit. We don't exactly do that, but I think there are all sorts of ways in which we can work with those organisations. So that's very important. And I think there's huge skills potential within all this. Just one small example in Munster, we have a setup called Studio Marine, I don't know how you pronounce it. They take in all sorts of wood waste and they create fantastic furniture and fencing and actually home furniture as well, all sorts of things. At the same time, they are developing skills for people with learning disabilities. It's a brilliant, brilliant setup, and it's just one example. I'm sure there are lots more within the county, but it's a really excellent one with multiple benefits coming out of it. The food waste thing is interesting because that's new for us, but an obvious one. Two examples: we won't be wasting waste, as it were. Positive end result from it, energy, we hope. But also it's mucky, and literally it'll help with managing all the rest of the waste as well. I was in Wales recently, Ceredigion, putting out food waste in a biodiversical bag, which seemed to make it an awful lot easier for everyone to manage. So I don't know if we're doing that, but it seems like one worth looking at rather than having slightly smelly boxes out on your front doorstep. Just a quick question I wasn't quite sure about was about the whole commercial thing. I've literally for decades had commercial people coming to me and saying, why can't I recycle? I think things have changed and improved, but I'm perhaps not quite clear, I may not have read it properly, on how we're dealing with and encouraging and supporting and maybe giving incentives to commercial businesses for recycling rather than just... Sorry, I will stop. Go on, but there's a couple of things there and a question.
So no, it's a subject we have a lot of passion for. The second cabinet,
Yes, I was going to say a few words. I really welcome this strategy moving forward, and I'd like to congratulate Rachel Joy on the speed with which the strategy has been drawn together. It's a fantastic effort. Clearly, we have ambitions to do a number of things differently. Waste is a really, really important service that the council delivers. It's one of those services that connects us with every single household in the county. And I'm very grateful to the very many people who responded to the consultation on waste, which has informed this strategy, which took place earlier in the year. And I do encourage members of the public and businesses to engage with us as we go through this process, because it's not about the council, it's about all of us. Absolutely agree with Councillor Norman. The whole sort of waste cycle, reducing what we use, reusing where we can, recycling, and trying to repurpose things so that they're put to best use. And of course, the respectful disposal of things that we can't deal with any other way. And I'd just like to take a moment to say thank you and to recognise the very many community groups that are out there that are dealing with some very disrespectful disposal, whether it's through littering, whether it's through failure to pick up dog poop, whether it's fly tipping. We have our enforcement and trading standards teams who are working really hard to minimise that. But our community groups all the way across the county are demonstrating how important and passionate people are about keeping our county clean and how disappointed they are, we all are, particularly at how littering has increased during COVID. So for all those people who are going out and making a little bit of a difference on the ground, trying to keep the place tidy, trying to keep the place clean, this is, a small example of what we as a county council are having to think big on in terms of how we deal with waste for everybody. And it's really important that we get this right. So waste has been seen historically as a liability, but as Councillor Norman says, it's becoming seen as an asset and an opportunity. There are income streams, persistent income streams that can be generated from the correct handling of waste. So I welcome this, excellent piece of work, good place to start from, a lot of work to do, and I look forward to working with members of the public, with other members, with Cabinet colleagues on this over the next future months. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I'll now go to group leaders, starting off with Councillor James, then Councillor Lester, and then Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Chair. I was very pleasantly surprised with the task group report, which I thought was clearly set out the issues and the problems that exist and the options. What I would plead with you is that ultimately we don't have a complex system. I experience it as a user in Powys of the sheer large numbers of receptacles which have to be provided and put out to be collected, and the amount of resources that are needed for that, not only by the public but also by the council. It is not user friendly, and as a result, it's no accident that many laybys on the border in my part of the world are fly tipped quite regularly with substantial amount of residential waste. So I was hope that we won't move to the complex system. Keep it simple, and then the public will use it. Will use it and be more thorough in the way they use it. But I have to say that so much of this could be solved by government legislation. I get very angry when I see the fact that we still have packaging that is non-recyclable and non-biodegradable. The government could change the way in which we operate substantially and save the country and local authorities an awful lot of money if they legislated to put the onus on the producer, not on the consumer, and ultimately the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Lester.
Yes, thank you. I've got a comment as group leader, and then I'll just go straight on to. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Councillor Lester. Yes, we can't see you, but we can hear you. And we can't hear you or see you now. Oh, yeah, we can see you.
Right. Okay. I'll be brief because, as I said, the internet connection is a bit shaky today for some reason. Yes. Just to say, on behalf of the group, Obviously, we've had Councillor Swinglehurst play a really big part in the Task and Finish group, and we would like to thank her for all of her contributions and feeding into the process. Big thanks to her. But one of the questions we have as a group is that, can we just check that the companies that are paid to engage with to sort out the recycling waste, they've been fully consulted and think it's feasible, the choice that we're going to put forward with regard to the recycling options? Can I just check that, please?
Councillor Leicester, are you referring to Worcestershire Council or third party?
No, the companies that sort the recycling waste.
In the future, is this or currently?
Well, the current ones we use, have they been consulted to show that their views are that it's possible to adopt this new alternative recycling scheme?
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful for Rachel Joy to answer that, because I know she's been in communications with Worcestershire.
I have had, chair members, I have had some discussions with Worcestershire about this. What I would say is that, you know, there are two stages here. There are what we can do over the life of the present contract up until the end of 2023. There are some things we can do and some things that we will probably need to negotiate with the present providers. And then there is what is done after that. And one of the things that, one of the early things that we'll be doing is an options appraisal about how best to deliver the strategy, where we will engage with business, we'll engage broadly with the industry, but also with residents, businesses, farming and agriculture and the voluntary sector across Herefordshire, about how we can put together a system that works well for everyone. That might mean some compromises here and there on all parts, but we can put together that kind of coalition to do it. At the end of the day, some of this will be market-led, so how well the recyclables can be sold. Some of it will be solved through legislation, the end producer responsibilities. So the industry is moving on this at a fairly rapid pace as well, and we are moving with them. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leicester. Do you have any other comments?
Well, just comments with my scrutiny chair's hat on, if I may.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, obviously I mentioned Councillor Swinglehurst and her contribution to the Task and Finish group, but there were 4 other councillors as well. Councillors Bartlett, Hay, Simons and Hewitt, who you know, ran with this. Kenton said it was going to be a big project right at the start, and he was absolutely right. And he said how important it was, and he was absolutely right. And so a lot of work ensued as a result. And I would just like to, on behalf of the Scrutiny Committee, thank all of those councillors and the officers who played their part on that Task and Finish group. Obviously, the executive listened to the recommendations and accepted the majority of the recommendations of the steering group and the Scrutiny Committee. So that is really encouraging. But the Scrutiny Committee has had a couple of goes at refining their views on this matter. And also, the Scrutiny Committee discussed this a week before this agenda item, I think, was published. So this paper won't have the opportunity to reflect on the extra points that have fed back since our meeting that we held on the 19th of July. But just wanted to make the extra points that there was agreement about the need to look into plastic bags payments for trade waste and the anomalies where that waste is actually household waste. The point was made about the need to label bins so that the bins can be, you know, people can use the bins as a source of information with regard to how to best to recycle. Obviously, there were concerns about landfill and the increase in the amount of landfill that's occurring at the moment. And I know Councillor Davis was very keen to address that issue. And And there was this idea from scrutiny that there's this need to continually monitor the contract because events change, as we know. And lastly, one of the things that I think was a really poignant point to make on behalf of scrutiny, and it was Councillor Stark who made it, and that was it's crucial when designing these services to put the resident at the heart of it. And that, I think, also includes the business communities as well. But the customer, if you like, for want of a better word, at the very heart of the schemes that we will eventually go forward to use. And that was very much the theme that was arrived at just at the last scrutiny meeting. So if that obviously can be fed in, then the scrutiny committee would be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lister. Councillor Matthews, and then Councillor Bailey.
Yes,
we can.
Yeah, good, because I'm having huge problems. Thank you. First of all, I chaired the Waste Management Committee for a couple of years back, too long to remember, 12, 14 years ago, and appreciate things have changed a little since then. First of all, I agree with Councillor James. I hope we don't go down the one that Powys looked at, because I think there's nothing more unsightly and unkempt than having dozens of containers around people's doorways. So I hope that cabinet members and officers look very carefully of which scheme is finally recommended to keep the number of containers down, even if it means, 3 weekly collection or something like that. I don't know if my apologies, I didn't catch the name of the lady who's advising us, but could I ask her what's the general feedback she's getting from other authorities of what sort of approach they're taking generally? Nothing comes through yet.
Rachel, do you want to answer that now?
I think it would be fair to say that where Herefordshire is now is in the middle of the pack. As you would expect, there are some authorities that, for very different reasons, will wait for legislation to come in. There are some authorities that are already setting a leading edge on this. Particularly, we see that over in Wales with places like Anglesey in terms of their approach. And also in terms of collection methods, it is very, very mixed. The public consultation that you held here on which collection method was quite finely balanced between bins and boxes. We will continue to listen carefully and continue to build that into service design, but it's for each authority to design something that works best for its area. I worked in London, in the middle of London. You had to collect 2 or 3 times a week because when the flats are down at 30 or 40 square metres per flat, that is the only way to solve the problem. Outer London, very, very different. A county again, very, very different. So it's important to design a system that works best for Herefordshire residents, taking account of the principles you're setting about reuse, maximising recycling. The government will force more and more separation of waste, which we'll have to take account of in service design. But we design it around what will work best for Herefordshire within the constraints of cost, within the constraints of public acceptance, and within the constraints of what works best.
Thank you very much. I was glad to hear you say about public acceptance and also that we're a rural county, so things vary for elsewhere. Could, if you would, Leader, just if I could ask Councillor Davis, it's just gone over to Appendix B. Brenton Parish Council have mentioned in their return in their information, Gemma, that could consideration be given to a further additional waste site north of the river to save all the traffic congestion over the new bridge and down to Rotherwas. Have you had a chance to look at that? Is there any possibility of that happening?
Yeah, nothing's come to me about that, but the whole point about this strategy is that this is the first point, and then we look at how can we deliver it best in Herefordshire. And one of the main things is they're looking at how do we reduce that carbon. So actually travelling waste from the top of the county to the bottom, bottom of Hereford City. Is that the right thing to do? That's all part of the plans moving forward.
Right, thank you very much, Leader.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Tony Fagan and then Councillor Peter Jimber.
Yeah, thank you. On behalf of the Green Group, I'd like to say it's a fantastic opportunity for Herefordshire to seriously minimise its waste and increase reuse, repair and recycling. Also, the use of community initiatives in this and the partnerships that we have in the county to help residents address waste and cut carbon emissions is a bold and necessary step. And it also provides us with an opportunity to grow businesses and social enterprise around waste and reuse. Also essential to this is the communication strategy, and it's fantastic to see this in there. We need to educate and encourage the residents around sort of behavior change, because we've all got used to living in a certain way, and we've got to recalibrate and look at this throwaway society that we have become and improve the transition. And so this communication strategy will help that. And it's fantastic to see circular economies becoming now the norm, whereas once they were a sort of radical attempt, which were accused of trying to sort of redesign capitalism. But actually we've just come back to the point of realizing that we cannot just keep producing waste and then chucking it into landfill or incinerating. So yeah, we really welcome this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fagan. Councillor Jimman.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. A big thank you to Councillor Gemma Davis for leading on this and for bringing everything together in the way it has. This is so important. The UN Sustainable Development Goal was that we should halve food waste by 2030. And I think it makes the point that what we're talking about is everybody owns this problem. It's not the council's problem, it's the public's problem, everybody who produces it and has it. So it is really important that everybody takes their part in it and understands it. Can I make a couple of very quick points? One is to realize the error of burying stuff. Sometimes we find it's 10 years, 20 years, 40 years later when we realize what we've buried is actually contaminating the very area in which we want to live. And therefore there needs to be a very good audit on anything that's buried so we do not leave a legacy for those that follow. And the other point that I would make, and it was made by one of the other councillors and I will support it 100%, we do not want more fly tipping. We must make it, therefore, easy for people to dispose. There should be no reason to not dispose through the proper routes. And therefore, enforcement must be in place for those who fly tip to catch them and severely deal with them. It's very unfortunate at the moment that farmers and landowners end up having to pay for the disposal of fly tip material. That seems grossly unfair in society, and I hope it can be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jimman. I'm tempted, Councillor Davis, just to move straight on to recommendation, if that's...
I'm just going to come back on a couple of questions that were raised, that was all. Yeah, just the one around the... I think Councillor Norman raised a question.
Commercial,
about commercial waste. Yeah, if you look within the papers, it talks about our disposal consultation, and it was one of the first times where we've engaged with businesses, and there is a clear indication that businesses do want to be part of this moving forward. So what we're looking at is what are the barriers in place that are preventing them being able to recycle, and how can we help aid that? I think it's really important that every single citizen and every single business recognises that they have a part to play in this particular strategy. So we have engaged with them. We will continue to engage, and they'll be part of that consultation, which is why I'm so grateful to have Rachel here, who is able to understand about that engagement with not just your residential community, but also the commercial community, which is brilliant. And it was just to come back on another one that Councillor James had brought up Councillor James, at page 33 talks exactly about what you said. It'd be good if the council, if the government did something about it. The resource and waste strategy 2018 is currently out for consulting with around about manufacturers' responsibility with regards to litter. So that's actually happening at this moment in time. That's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll put this recommendation to the Cabinet members. Yes, I'll read this one. That A, the Cabinet authorises the new integrated waste management strategy for Herefordshire, adopts the new targets within the document as detailed in Appendix A, and authorises the development of a benefits realisation action plan to achieve the agreed targets. B, the Cabinet authorises the design, development, procurement and implementation of the proposed waste handling pilot schemes and approves the expenditure of £1.5 million from the Council's waste reserve to progress and implement the schemes. C, the Cabinet authorises the expenditure of the Section 106 allocation for recycling projects up to the value of £92,000 to progress the proposed waste handling pilot schemes through design, development, procurement and implementation. And finally, the Cabinet authorises the Section 151 officer to take all operational decisions relating to the above recommendations. I suppose as I read that, what comes out to me, it's great to use some of the Section 106 money that we've got lying around. So that's really good. And thank you to the Section 151 officer for managing things in such a way that we have a reserve to use to spend on all this. So thank you. So I put that to the vote. All in favour? Thank you very much. Move then on to item 7. This is about the care of people who have been in hospital with mental health related issues and how they get transferred to the community. I think that's roughly what it's about. So it's to approve the joint policy and standard operating procedures, Section 117 aftercare, which is required under the Mental Health Act 1983. People who have been detained in hospital for treatment of their mental health needs may require care and support after they leave hospital. This aftercare will be arranged by the council or the NHS and provided in a variety of ways depending on people's needs. Herefordshire Council and Herefordshire and Worcester Clinical Commissioning Group have a joint responsibility in law to make available appropriate aftercare services to people who have previously been detained in hospital for treatment under the Mental Health Act 1983. In practice, this responsibility applies only to aftercare for people who have been detained in hospital for more than 28 days. This item begins on page 219 of the agenda pack, and I think this is, I think Councillor Norman is going to introduce this as this becomes her portfolio from next week.
Thank you, Leader. In fact, you've literally taken the words out of my mouth. Every word you've said is more or less what I was going to say. So I'll just add to that, stressing that the Council and the CCG discharge their joint responsibilities can be complex and technical. And so if I could just add, the report has been updated to set out the issues as clearly as possible. I think that was a point that was raised when we discussed it earlier. So that's really all I need to say, but I'll ask Paul if this is going to take it further.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. The standard operating procedure and the new policy, as the leader has suggested, has been developed with the Herefordshire and Worcester CCG and the NHS partners across Herefordshire and Worcester. It replaces a policy that was originally in place from 2015. Of course, since 2015, there have been changes in the structure of the Clinical Commissioning Group, the CCG, and there have been many changes in council and practice during that period around the Mental Health Act. So this new policy replaces an existing policy. There is a legal obligation for the council to have such a policy, and it's been jointly constructed with our partners in the NHS, and will improve the support that we can offer to people who are subject to Section 117, and of course, the people who are subject to Section 117 under the Mental Health Act are at the centre of the new standard operating procedure and the new policy. And if there are any further technical questions, we also have you and Archibald online should that be required.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So pass over to any members of the Cabinet who wish to comment. Diana, do you want to start? No, Joe.
Yes,
Councillor Twymby.
yeah, thanks very much. It's so important that people get the right care when they leave. I don't like talking to you behind me. It's so important that people get the right care when they leave hospital and they're vulnerable. And it's really good to see that the plans are put together by a group of people surrounding that person, including the people nominated by that person, so that you know that they have their best interests at heart. And naturally, what jumps out at me is also when I see anything to do with children and young people. I've just got a couple of questions. Firstly, I assume this is a pretty standard agreement that happens in other places. When I first looked at it, I thought this looks really complicated. I get very cross that structures are constantly being changed by various, government actions and local health systems. It all seems changing all the time. And so I'm glad that this gives more clarity. And I suppose I just hope that in practice it's a lot more straightforward than it sounds, because, joint responsibilities and how funding's apportioned, it sounds as though it could take up a lot of time and effort. So I just hope that it's more straightforward in practice than it sounds in theory. And then I just hope that we have adequate resources within the county, because there's no point in having a needs assessment if we haven't got the services to send people to that we're recommending. In particular, I'm thinking of counselling, residential care and support for carers. So I suppose I'd like a bit of reassurance that those things actually exist in adequately resourced.
Thank you, Councillor. Absolutely, assessment for Section 117 aftercare jointly with the NHS is standard operational procedure for the council. We do it all the time, not every day, of course, but it's certainly a standard assessment methodology. And relationships with the CCG around these issues are very productive. It is often joint funded, and we have a very productive discussion with our NHS partners around that particular issue. It does endorse a number of resources that the council expends, but of course that's well within budget. And we expect a similar number of cases each year, so we don't exceed the budgets in these areas, and we manage within the resources both operationally and financially that we have as a council. In terms of the support networks for the individuals themselves and carers, of course you'll be aware that the council has an extensive carers network, and also the carers strategy is soon to come back for a refresh in 2021, but the existing strategy is still in place, as is the recently updated advocacy contract that came to Cabinet a couple of months ago. So we have advocates available, and we also have the carers network and a commissioned carers service to support the relatives and the individuals that are subject to this legislation. It is part of the standard approach of operational social work, and we have been undertaking these procedures since the Care Act in 2014. And we will continue to do so, but now under a new standard operating procedure jointly agreed with our partners. And it does give us the advantage, because it is an STP procedure. It means that Herefordshire and Worcester are working in exactly the same way, regardless of the border, which is a huge step forward, because we used to have different operating procedures, and that occasionally cause cross-border issues.
Thank you. And the ICS applies equally if it applies to STP, then it's the same.
It will feed through to the ICS, and the ICS was one of the reasons why this policy was interesting to develop jointly, because of course we will soon have an integrated care system across the STP footprint.
Thank you.
So Davis.
Yeah, I'm glad there was clarification on that. I was going to say, somebody working in the NHS, we just now have ICS, it's everything. So living and breathing it is different. And I always like to take this opportunity for people that aren't part of it to understand that. So really grateful that you've explained it's to do with Herefordshire and Worcestershire, and it involves the commissioning, everything all done under one hub, which is a really brilliant move back probably to what it maybe has been before. As somebody who wrote and implemented the quality impact assessment that's in this report, I am delighted to see one actually filled out and filled out correctly for all of the protected characteristics. So thank you very much for that. That has made me a very happy person. a couple of things. One is around the membership of the oversight group, and I just wonder whether there's a place there somewhere, because it's very officer led, whether or not there's anything there that could be about the user, and whether or not we could look into bringing a user into there, because it's very senior officer level, and actually the actual person's voice, I think, might be lost in that, and they're the best people to tell us whether or not it's working right. So I just wondered if that could be considered by you, really, with regards to that. I think that was the only concern I had, really, because you've answered the ICS and STP one. So just that query around hearing the voice of the person.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I can confirm that in addition to this strategy, I do chair the STP Footprint Learning Disabilities Partnership Board, and part of the redesign of that in the last few months is that we brought the 4 Learning Disabilities Partnership chairs into the board as board members, and I would be very comfortable to pursue that in terms of this particular piece of legislation. Lived experience is clearly the voice that we want to hear, and absolutely that's a very, very good recommendation, which we should pursue that on your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll pass now to group leaders, to start this time with Councillor Lester, then Councillor Matthews, Councillor Fagan.
Thank you. On behalf of the Conservative group, obviously we see the value of making sure that our mental health services are spot on. So we support the approach and the policy and procedures, and we hope that they will be implemented very well. We've got a good track record, I believe, of adult social care in many guises. So we hope that this will progress in the same way. Just might be advisable, though, that this matter and the procedures are reviewed in due course by the Health and Wellbeing Board and the scrutiny function. So just note that here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. So Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, we fully support the recommendation, Leader. A very sound report. And it's I'm ever so pleased that we're doing what we can to ease the situation on these unfortunate people. So it's got our full support.
Thank you. Councillor Fagan.
Yes, we support the report as well. One thing, a little bit of clarity, is this only for people who have been released, who have been detained in hospital for more than 28 days. So that's the question. I just want to say that actually working together to support people through difficult times, and particularly coming through COVID, is absolutely essential. It's one of the statistics I've read that in the week following discharge from a psychiatric hospital, people are dramatically at high risk of suicide, and that can be up to 246 times for women and 102 times higher for men. So it's and that risk remains markedly high for a month following the release from a psychiatric hospital. So everything we can do to support people is welcomed. Thank you.
Smith, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor. I can confirm that under paragraph 2, it does confirm it is only over 28 days. Absolutely, that's the legislation. And just to draw Councillor's attention to, there is currently a live suicide prevention strategy in place within the Council that again was jointly developed with our partners in the NHS. And of course, the group that monitors the implementation of this standard operating procedure and policy can quite easily triangulate that with that strategy, and we will do so to ensure that the linkage between the two is maintained, and absolutely that where prevention can be achieved, prevention is achieved as a result of both of those strategies.
Sarah.
I think you and Archibald contribute separately.
Thank you very much. Mr. Archibald, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and thank you for the questions. Yeah, just to add slightly more detail to Paul Smith's answer in relation to that. So yes, Councillor Fagan is correct. One of the most significant risk factors for suicide is having a spell of treatment in mental health hospital, and in particular in the period 48 hours and then up to a month after discharge. And that is specifically addressed in our local suicide prevention strategy, and our mental health trust and other health partners have actions in place to address that locally. So you're right to draw attention to it, and it is indirectly linked to the Section 117 aftercare provision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. That's actually, I thought that was quite interesting to understand. Is there a reason why it's 28 days and not 21 days? I mean, that's obviously in the legislation. The legislation's just decided there should be a legislative obligation after a certain period.
So essentially, yes, it doesn't, the law doesn't articulate it explicitly in that form, Leader. It refers to detention under certain provisions of the Act, but in practice, all of those provisions involve detention for a period of 28 days or more. And it's worth noting that the great majority of people who go into hospital either do so voluntarily or are detained for a period of less than 28 days. So it is important to note that this provision under Section 117 applies only to a small minority of people who spend any time in mental health hospital.
Thank you for that. So Councillor Ginman.
Thank you very much, Leader. On behalf of the Independent Group, obviously we welcome this this paper, and we have, as you well know, one or two members who are particularly keen and interested in mental health issues. I'm sure they will be very much welcoming it. Can I just ask one question, please? We are, of course, not an island, Hereford and Worcester. We actually have neighbours who are not just in another county, but in another country. How does this interact cross-border? And indeed, our own hospital has catchment into that area. And I just want to understand that there should be no delay because of the very point that Councillor Fagan has made so well, that you need to be absolutely on the mark with regard to these individuals the moment they come out from care.
Councillor Davis may give the exact number, but of course the activity of the hospital in Herefordshire there is a large contingent from Paris particularly, of course also from Monmouthshire, and there is a liaison point with neighbouring councils from Herefordshire, and of course residency is the primary driver for the NHS support that someone receives, but absolutely categorically there will be liaison with the local health boards in those areas. And we would hope that the support provided to those individuals, whilst funded from the Welsh NHS, is of the same calibre and the same high quality that we offer to residents within Herefordshire or Worcestershire. That's certainly the case for acute and clinical services, and I would hope it to be the same for mental health.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Passing on then finally to Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with what Councillor Davis said about the need for some involvement of from the user side of this. I mean, I think we've learnt, I hope the council has learnt its lesson about officer dominance of within the council. The other thing that I'm concerned about, and I think Councillor Fagan raised it, and I've experience of situation, the 28 days. I know this is set by national legislation, but I recently had a very good friend who was detained, was released about 22 days, and attempted suicide with life-changing consequences. I do think it should be more about not the actual time, but the diagnosis of the danger or the likelihood of the position. You know, the mental health is under a great deal of pressure. There's a great deal of lack of resources and beds and an ability to retain, which has been dramatically reduced over the last 20, 30 years. The facilities available for detention, and I worry that some people are going to miss out, or we may get rather like the case of this friend of mine who was sadly let down to a certain extent by by society. Thank you.
Mr. Archibald, do you want to respond to that? I think you've probably already done so, already mentioning the suicide policy which we have in place.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it's important to underline that aftercare is also provided in many cases to people who have been in hospital for less than a shorter period than 28 days. It's just not specifically provided for by this part of the legislation. So when anyone has had a spell in hospital, they will obviously have a series of clinical assessments and review, and they will also very often be referred to adult social care for reassessment or review, and that review and reassessment will identify with the person and agree with them what support they need, whether that's continuation of something that was happening before or some new or additional support. So aftercare is not the exclusive preserve of section 117. It's just that section creates a specific focus on it for people who've been detained for a longer period. But I do understand the concerns that Councillor James is referring to.
Thank you very much. Councillor Norman, do you want so we'll move on, to the recommendation. The recommendation is as follows. Firstly, that the draft joint policy and draft standard operating procedures for section 117 mental health aftercare are approved. And B, the acting director for adults and communities, in consultation with the cabinet member for health and wellbeing and the director for children and families, is authorised to make all operational decisions to ensure implementation of the policy and procedure, agreeing any operational changes to the documents, including those arising from case law, as required for their implementation. So if I can have a show of hands to those who agree that recommendation. Thank you very much. All in favour? Moving on then to item 8. This is the budget setting and consultation for the next municipal year, which is April 22 to April 23, or April 23, which may seem a long way ahead, but I think we're trying to get a little bit of advance notice, engage with people more quickly and earlier in the process. We've learned how important that is, and I'll hand over, if I may, to Councillor Harvey to introduce this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'm pleased to announce this report on the proposed budget consultation timetable and process for the coming financial year. We weren't able to start as early as we normally do last year because of COVID and because of uncertainties in terms of the scale of the financial pressures that we were expecting to face. This year, we're back on track and starting at an appropriately early time, which hopefully will give us the time that we need to engage with all of the different interest groups that we need to in order to take an informed view of how we put the budget together for the coming year. So we will be, as usual, consulting with business, with communities, with hard to reach groups, and encouraging individual residents to get involved and to comment through discussion groups and also online. We're also offering, we're going back to offering an early opportunity for scrutiny to get involved in shaping the budget with hopefully meetings in November, if those can manage to be timetabled, and that's something that's welcomed by our scrutiny committees. We'll be undertaking online consultation again. We're not too sure how freely we're going to be able to engage in face-to-face conversations, but we'll certainly be doing online consultations and running Zoom discussion groups, which will hopefully allow us to involve hard to reach groups in conversation, undertake a business survey, talk to people in different localities throughout the county where often we find that priorities of those communities for services differ from one place to another, and it's important that we understand and reflect that. Part of what we're doing this year in the way that we're putting the consultation together is building on the questions and the responses that we received to those questions last year. The theme for the consultation this year is the council undertaking a transformational journey. We have a lot of change in the way that we're looking at delivering our services across all areas of the council's operation, and one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we engage in conversations which help to both explain what those changes are, how that transformational journey is developing, and also to receive feedback and comment from people on how they'd like to see that journey evolving. So the report sets out the timetable, the points in it where we are expecting to engage with different groups, and I welcome comment from colleagues.
Mr. Lovegrove, do you want to comment at this stage? We'll wait for him.
I'd only add to, I'm very focused on the 11th of February next year, and that is looming large, and that is the date when full council will set the work.
Good, thank you. Councillor Davies.
Yeah, a really, really comprehensive approach to the budget once again, Councillor Harvey and Section 151 officer, really grateful for that. I suppose it's more of a plea really to members of the public, to people that we're engaging with, that I can read social media sometimes when I'm not crying at what they're saying, but when I get rid of the tears and I read what the actual comments are trying to get at, a lot of the time it'll be, what's the point in telling you spend your money on anything anyway? And then I'll follow it up and say, did you take part in the consultation? And they'll go, well, no, because there's no point. There absolutely is a point to doing it. We cannot change our direction unless you take part in things like this. We can't take social media comments from when people put questions. What do you agree with this or not? We can't do things like that. What we can do is take it into consultations such as this. Would be really keen, again, God, I sound like a stuck record, to get in the voice of youth in here. So we do have looked after children that we could be engaging with those specific groups, whether or not we could also maybe go to the City Youth Council is what I was thinking. They have events coming up in September and October, I believe. Maybe we could go in there and ask them what their opinions are, because we've got a really good cohort here that we could be utilising. And you know my keenness, if we put culture and youth together, we get really engaging conversations, and whether or not we can be a little bit outside of the box with what kind of things we do with our consultation, I'd be really grateful. But no, it was just that query whether or not we could engage slightly differently with youth, because we really struggle to get their voices.
Just to come back on that, we definitely are intending to consult with young people. We're certainly going to be running the event at the sixth form technologies that we did before. I've also asked that we engage specifically with our care leavers, and to make a point of having some conversation sessions with them, and we'll certainly take it away and see whether there's anything we can do that's a bit creative and sort of interesting to young people. Not everybody loves graphs as much as I do.
Nobody loves graphs as much as you do.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Davies. People do kind of criticise us, don't they, for not listening, and we want to listen more. We want more people to participate. I think what we're trying to do this time is build on the previous consultation. So rather than repeating the same questions, we're building on it from year on year. But I'm quite interested in the idea of a citizens' assembly. It's sort of a bit of a throwaway line put in here without very much meat on it. I don't know whether Councillor Harvey can comment any more, or Mr. Lovegrove about that. So the citizens' assembly. There's also mention of participatory budgeting. Well, what on earth is that? Can anybody explain it in a few words for me?
Well, what we're looking at doing is using the process of participatory budgeting combined with the Citizens' Assembly format to actually do a specific piece of work in the autumn, which will complement what we're doing in terms of the budget consultation, but we'll be looking specifically at how we deploy the anticipated new homes bonus money on climate change and energy, getting to carbon zero initiatives, and that will involve members of the public from across the county in that as a specific piece of work, dealing with how we, and they will actually be helping to identify how specific pots of money get spent on particular projects and pieces of work. So it will be a real hands-on piece of sort of citizen engagement and helping to prioritise how that money gets spent. And that's participatory budgeting.
Good, so there's actually a real sum of money that individuals can actually influence what we spend our
Absolutely, yes.
money on.
Yeah, and that will be the upfront promise. You know, it will be spent the way the assembly and the process arrives at in terms of its priorities.
Thank you. So I'll go over now to group members, starting off with Bob Matthews.
You caught me unawares. I was looking at something else, and it wasn't a newspaper. I was looking at the next item. I agree with what's been proposed, and get on and put things in place, and so that we can move on. Thank you.
I think it's really refreshing that you can have a joke at yourself. I think that's great, Councillor Matthews. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we welcome this report, and Councillor Davis spoke about sort of looking at it from sort of outside the box, and I think certainly the idea of participatory budgeting is doing that. So we welcome the idea of a citizens' assembly, and I commend Councillor Chance for pushing on this, because it is something that she and I brought to the council probably nearly 2 years ago, and it was unanimously accepted. But since then, we haven't heard very much. So how citizens chosen through sortition can inform ways of allocating the new homes bonus funding, and particularly towards our kind of zero carbon ambitions and climate change issues in the county is really to be welcomed. Also, the fact that this process will involve proper information being provided to residents, so that they can actually make informed judgments rather than sort of emotional judgments on social media, which are pretty well uninformed. So yeah, we look forward to this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fagan. Councillor Ginman.
Thank you, Leader. On behalf of the Independents for Herefordshire, it comes as no surprise that I'm pleased to see this document in the form it is. We all know that there are statutory requirements that we always have to deal with, but this is a real attempt to get local engagement, local involvement, and I support Councillor Davis's comments in that regard. I think it really is important that we do engage and do indeed urge people to come forward with us. It is always good to be able to not have to worry about distant party didacts from headquarters. We as independents have that opportunity to really look at it on a local basis. Thank you.
Thank you. And then next, Councillor James, and then Councillor Lester. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, there's little you can disagree with in this. I do caution, be very, very careful over citizens' juries. In order to do it as it should be done, and I've been involved in it in the past, it is quite expensive if you're going to do it properly and fairly, and it's not open to legal challenge, because you have to independently get an independent body to produce a group of people who reflect in all shapes, politically and socially, the county as a whole, and that comes as with quite an expensive tag to it, price tag to it. So I don't think there's anything anyone can disagree with this. There is a problem that, you know, the vast majority of people will not or don't want to get involved in this sort of thing. You know, some might suggest that there is a citizens' jury. It's called the council, appointed by the electorate as a whole. Anyway, thank you.
I'll ask Councillor Harvey to comment on that in a moment, but first of all, Councillor Lester.
Yes, thank you. I cut out there a bit, so I didn't quite hear the last bit of Councillor James's comments, but I think he was expressing the reservations about the consultation process and the cost, but I note those concerns. But on the whole, the Conservative group would welcome any form of consultation that involves members of the public and increases that involvement. So we would welcome that. And also from a scrutiny point of view, we would welcome the discussion on the budgets as soon as possible. And so I know Councillor Harvey has expressed the wish that that happens in November. So we will be investigating how we can fit that into the work programme accordingly, and look forward to scrutinising those in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Councillor Davis, I don't know whether you, Councillor Harvey, I don't know whether you want to comment on the cost and the process we have to go through for participatory budgeting.
Well, it will have a cost, but I feel that that's it's not outrageous. It's commensurate with the process. We're not inventing something brand new. It's something that's been tried and tested and you know, sort of honed and polished by others. I think it's worthwhile investing in increasing public engagement in the democratic process, and this is one way of doing that. You know, yes, there are 53 elected members, but you know, we don't have all of the answers, and sometimes not everybody reads all the papers before they start voting on things one way or the other. If we've got a bunch of engaged, interested, intelligent, well-informed, passionate members of the public who, you know, are keen to be involved and to do so knowing that the choices that they make will have money put behind them and will achieve things on the ground, I think that's an extra incentive to get people to get involved, and that can hardly be a bad thing.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I'll move on then to the recommendation, which is again fairly short. First of all, that the proposed timetable for the development and adoption of the medium-term financial strategy and the 2022-23 budget be approved. Second, the approach for consulting on budgeted proposals for 22-23 be approved. And thirdly, for a citizens' assembly to be held in the late autumn to carry out a participatory budget process to inform ways of allocating the anticipated New Homes bonus funding. So I put that recommendation, and with a show of hands, all in favour? Thank you very much. So we move on then to the major contract performance update. This is to update Cabinet on progress made following the major contract performance review reported to Cabinet in September 2020. That report approves improvements to the Council's major contracts for public realm services and property and facilities management. This item begins on page 287 of the agenda pack, and I'll pass over to Councillor Davis for an introduction.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, pleased to present the report, not pleased that it's had to happen, but pleased that we're in a position now to actually have delivery on procurement and commissioning. I won't go into the detail too much. If it's okay, I'll pass over to either Neil Taylor or the Section 151 officer, Andrew Lovegrove, to go through what this is, because this talks about recommendations that have come out of the major contract performance review that we called last year into the contract, the BBLP contract, and also around a whistleblowing investigation into the City Link Road. So Section 151 officer, Andrew, I believe it's yours.
Yes, I'm very happy to talk to Peter on that. If you recall, that the report came to yourselves back in September with recommendations that how to improve the relationship with the contractor, greater contracts. We have now made progress, and we have appointed two key officers to help us show what good looks like in terms of the contract management and the commissioning of services from the contractor. That's starting to have an impact on how the council operates, and there's clearly a lot more progress needs to be done. As you can also see in the recommendation, there's a proposal to set up an improvement panel board who will keep a very close eye on the progress and the changes that are needed and being proposed. So that's the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Cabinet members, Councillor Harrington, do you wish to?
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Davis and Andrew Lovegrove. I fully support this. We're moving in the direction that is the right direction to be moving in. We have seen over the last decade, a reduction in resources from central government, which has meant that we need to respond better to how we manage our contracts and our limited resource and our capital or revenue that comes our way. We need to centralise that oversight. We also need to make sure that officers and departments that are trying to deliver projects or major contracts are supported by a specialised and well-resourced team. All the recommendations that disallow that. The most important for me is the creation of the oversight, what I would call the oversight board, which means that both senior cabinet members and officers from all departments are constantly reviewing the management of the major contracts. So I thoroughly recommend this. It is the appropriate way forward, and I thank everyone for their work.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And I concur with Councillor Davis. So I'm glad to see this before us, but you know it's disappointing that it's come to this. But you know, better out than in, as they say. We spoke last week at Cabinet about the HCCTP package and the various failures and problems that have surfaced on that. An over £6 million overspend on the delivery of the major road element of the work. As a consequence of that, diverting funds provided by our Marches Let for complementary public realm and transport projects, which is a direct consequence of that, has meant that those projects have not come forward in a timely fashion to offset the issues that the road itself created in terms of people and vehicle movement in the city. Over 100 compensation events approved during the delivery of the road through BBLP, while not having the evidence to hand to give assurance to the public and indeed to our elected members and ourselves on the value achieved for the public money spent, and additional land acquisitions by bypassing the council's normal processes for capital investments. Now, you know, this is a major contract, you know, but it is not the only major contract that we aspire to have. We've talked earlier in this meeting about the waste contract and the waste strategy. You know, we need to, as a council, to be able to manage these contracts effectively and efficiently, and to give ourselves and the public assurance on that. So I welcome the recommendations that came from the whistleblowing investigation, improved oversight by the council on contract delivery, improved balancing of pain and gain share and management of risk within large and complex contracts. Separation needs to be maintained between companies that work with us as customer friend in designing solutions and in drafting tenders, and the companies which then go on to bid to undertake that work. Improve governance throughout the process, review performance tests which are applied to the contracts to make sure that they're fit, and to examine the decisions that were taken specifically in relation to land acquisitions. Yes to all of that. And consequently, I welcome the proposals in front of us today for the recruitment of experts in contract management and commissioning who will report respectively to our Council's Section 151 officer and to monitoring officer, who are, let me remind you all, are two statutory officers responsible for assuring the Council's financial and legal probity. This will strengthen oversight and assurance, not just on the BBLP contract, but on any large-scale contract that we have, and will support ongoing activity in the new project management office as we deliver on large-scale highways, public realm, waste, and other contracts in delivering services for the residents of Herefordshire. Yes, please, let's do this and get better.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I turn now to group leaders, and this time I'll begin with Councillor Fagan, then Councillor Ginman, and Councillor James in that order.
Thank you, Leader. On behalf of the Green Group, there's not very much to say apart from we have perfect example in Hereford right now as to why it's imperative that we improve our project management. And so we welcome this report, and getting these projects right is absolutely essential for the residents of Herefordshire. Thank you.
Councillor Ginman.
Thank you, Leader. On behalf of the Independents for Herefordshire, we obviously recognise this as being an extremely important step along the road to sorting out and correcting something that has clearly not been happening in the way it should in the past. Much has been made of the length of time it's taken to get to this point. I think that fails to always understand the processes, procedures, the discovery that's required. And one would only say now, good, it started, we're getting somewhere. Very pleased to see it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. The question is, why is it taking so long? You know, it's 2.25 years now since it's 2 years since it was first known by this administration. Why does it take so long? Don't kid yourself that you won't get it wrong on compulsory purchase of land or property. It's fraught with difficulties of assessing the actual true value, or what is assessed ultimately as a true value. And the only way you will ever achieve that is by overestimating the cost, and that tends to push the price up anyway. But other than that, I welcome the process. Thank you.
Councillor
And
Lester.
my apologies, I may have to go early. I've got a medical appointment. Thank you.
Councillor Lester.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we welcome the project management. Obviously, when things go awry, projects aren't managed properly. It's a shame in this instance, because in the past the council's managed to develop and proceed with so many other projects that have gone well. There's an anomaly here that obviously needs to be dealt with. One thing that would actually benefit from, I think everyone would benefit from, is that there should be another
off his camera, maybe that might help the connection.
Sorry, back again. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can now. Yes.
Sorry, apologies. It's really not a good connection today. Sorry. Yes, it was just to make the point really that a further request be made to the audit team to establish the date on which the elected member responsible for the transport package was notified of the increase in the cost of the project, and that would have the impact that would have in the overall budget. So that would be our request. Thank you.
And finally, Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I note that item E on paragraph 4 about where you refer to the report recommendation include further financial appraisal of BBLP spending, especially focusing on payments for quantity surveying, project leads and program management, and BBLP's value for money, which we've always been querying for a long time. I know it's easy to criticize from the outside, but I think there's room for improvement, and I'm glad that that's been addressed. One thing I would ask, Leader, and I'm sure you'll understand, your administration at the moment has not got an overall majority. So it's imperative that on these key issues like this, that you, Leader, and Chief Executive work closely with group leaders to make sure we keep some sort of harmony and cooperation in the system to make sure things move along sweetly. So I ask you to consider that when you're addressing these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. So I'll just make a couple of observations. Others might want to add to them, but Councillor Terry James has referred to a period of 2.25 years. Well, I suppose my reflection is go back another 12 years before that. Don't expect us to do things in 2.25 years when they've been deficiencies going back for a lot longer. And my observation on Jonathan Lester's comments about the previous administration having done some good things. I don't know whether it's just coincidence, but two things have been landed in our lap right at the very end, which are just atrocious: the failure on the SWTP project and the one which we've just got now. So as we look back on the previous administration's work, we do not think it looks very good. I don't know whether anybody else wants to be a bit more forthright, or Councillor Davis.
I just wanted to come back, and I know that the Conservative Party representative came forward and asked about having audit look at when the cabinet member, which is John Harrington, knew. Quite happy to be open and transparent. It's what we do. It's why everything that we do comes out in the public domain. So I've got no issues with that, and I'm sure Councillor Harrington hasn't. No. And it's really, it really galls me when we have people saying things like, well, why didn't you get things sorted in 2 years? Do you understand the complexity of the information that we've had to go through? Do you understand about the HR policies that we have to follow to make sure that we don't fall the wrong side of legislation? It just galls me, because you talk about loving Herefordshire, and actually what you're doing is taking pot shots all the time about, oh, how soon things have been done, etc. This is the line. This is about us getting proper governance in place to make sure that decisions like before don't happen again. So that's what we're doing. Let's stop the arguing and thinking about the people of Herefordshire and how we make sure that the money is being used properly.
Leader, if I can get back in there, I fully agree with Councillor Davis. That's why I ask you for your assurance that in our present situation, there'll be close cooperation and close working together so we can move this county forward.
And there absolutely will be, Councillor Matthews, close working together, but it also should be recognised that good tension is how things work properly. So pointing things out when things are wrong, i.e. saying, can we put this before audit? We do it all the time. We're happy to take that from other parties. It's the lack of constructive tension within the BBLP contract, which has meant that we're in a stage where now we're having to deal with value for money. So yes, working all together, but appreciate that it's okay for us to not agree on things as well.
And Councillor Matthews, you chose to be part of the opposition. You walked away from leading your group the day after winning the election in 2019. So a really good role, given that we're in a cabinet system, is to be an active member of the opposition, since that's where you've chosen to put yourself.
There were very good reasons for that, Liz, and you know why, but we won't go there.
Let's not.
I think
All
we'll.
I'm asking, leader, I will stop now. All I'm asking is to make sure group leaders and proper cooperation takes place to save any arguments and any, challenges going on. It's better to work together than to get things hindered in that way. That's all I'm asking.
I'm sure we will be working together for the best of the county. That is what we're all here for. So I'll move to the recommendation on this, item 9. The recommendation is that a cabinet note the outcome of the whistleblowing investigation and in line with the improvement plan, a contract management and commissioning resource is created in the corporate centre to provide capacity to support the delivery of the improvement plan using the Programme Management Office, the PMO. And secondly, Cabinet approve the establishment of an improvement board to include senior officers and cabinet members. Can I have a show of hands as to all in favour? Thank you very much. Moving on then to item 9. We're doing pretty well, very well actually, time. So item 9, Recovery and Investment Fund. This is to recommend to Cabinet the approval in principle of the establishment of a COVID-19 Recovery and Investment Fund to support Herefordshire's businesses. This is recommended to investigate providing additional targeted funding opportunities for local business growth in support of delivering the county plan. Any funding provided will be in addition to the support that is already established and available. This item begins on page 297 with a supplement published on the 28th of July. If I ask Councillor Harvey to introduce this item.
Okay, thank you very much, Leader. Now, if we're making such good time, do you want me to read it verbatim? No, okay. All right. In summary then, this report proposes that the council explores the possibility of moving beyond handing out grants to consider whether it's feasible and desirable for the council to actively invest in local businesses to assist with and accelerate the county's economic recovery from COVID. Draw members' attention to the funding principles and the funding objectives that are set out in paragraph 13 of the report. I won't go through them, having threatened to read it out verbatim. But what we are looking at doing is simply exploring the option at this stage. There's no commitment, but we feel it is worth looking at whether the council has a role to play and whether that is something that would be welcomed by residents and by our business community in actively investing in our local economy, rather than just handing out grants. So the cost of appointing a programme director and the external specialist advisors that the report recommends to enable further work to be identified, we're not expecting wanting to spend more than set out here, 100,000. And this will be funded from the Recovery and Investment Earmarked Fund, which was established during the close down of the 2020-21 accounts. And the proposal is that the balance of that fund be transferred to bolster the council's general reserve.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. These questions, I guess, might be directed a little bit towards Section 151 officer. I think, as we talked about, this is a general principle idea, so the details will follow, and I guess the devil is in the detail. So there must surely be risks of this because we are proposing to provide financial resources to businesses which cannot get finance from a bank, which by itself means it's more risky than a bank. So I just want to make sure we're not abusing money which we're collecting from taxpayers to support businesses that really shouldn't be supported because they have no future. And I'm just it's probably in the detail, but just some assurance at this stage that those sort of risks will be managed, how they might be managed.
Thank you, Leader. As Councillor Howard, this is really a proposal to look at the art of the possible rather than actually implementation of that. So this is actually looking at how these things could be put in place. There are a number of issues, like I said, about risk. And paragraph 8, we make it very clear in the report. We don't know the scale and size of the demand for this kind of implementation. So we may find there is not that much demand out there, although that be a large amount of demand. But until we do that piece of work, we don't know. And as you say, a lot of the detail will be worked through in terms of how any risks are managed, how risks are shared. There are a number of ways that this can be done. Other councils are doing something very similar, so we are learning to other councils about the advantages and pitfalls that they've worked through. Risk management is the key one. How the businesses are evaluated and identified is another key one. Most of the councils use a third party to do that piece of work. That does seem an appropriate way to do that. So actually, you are right. This does increase the amount of risk, but that risk can be managed and dealt with.
Any other observations?
Yeah,
Councillor Toynbee.
yeah, thanks. I was going to say the same thing as you about risk, and thank you. But I was also going to ask, sorry if I missed it in here, about what's happening in other places. And so that's interesting that you're already aware where other councils are doing this and what the pitfalls might be. That's really interesting. And I think it's got huge potential for Herefordshire to be, to be a sort of beacon in this kind of thing. It could be a real win-win if we're supporting local businesses coming out of COVID, especially if there's social value, environmental enhancement, all that kind of thing. So, I think it's really positive, and, I hope the project team will really get stuck in. With the actual recommendations that we're being asked to approve today, I know this is me being pedantic, but A says to approve further investigation into the establishment of nothing, and then C is to authorise you to sort of go away and actually do something to do something. So I'm just wondering if you actually need A, or if, it sounds as though you have all, that you already think it is possible. And so do we need A?
I think it's possible, but and for you as cabinet, you may not think it's possible. So that's why you've got recommendation A. Because if you feel it isn't, then that's what you can say. So I'm quite happy for you to amend that. That's the logic to have a 3 there. But if you think it's worth evaluating.
No, I was just asking because they, it seems as though you have to have A. You can't see that A. But anyway, thanks.
Consider that perhaps after the other group leaders have had their go at it. I'll start off this time with Councillor Ginman, and then Councillor James, Councillor Lester. Councillor Ginman.
Thank you, Leader. Apologies, just trying to click the right button. Yeah, certainly on behalf of Independents for Herefordshire, clearly I'm very supportive of this being explored. I'm extremely conscious that a lot of small businesses, and Herefordshire does have a lot of them, may have missed out on government funding, particularly those that were only just established, that didn't have balance sheets to show for a period of a year or greater. But I'm equally aware, and your comments about banks, of course, is that they have always been very good at supporting those that are already winning, but they're not always very good at helping those to get started. So we're not in the business of speculative investment, but we can sometimes assist by perhaps looking at business rates, looking at council tax, and maybe matched funding. And any of those does open up opportunity, which I think we really should be trying to help and see how we can do that. So welcome very much to this suggestions.
Thank you. Councillor James, who might not be here anymore. Has Councillor James left us?
Yes, we can.
Okay, Councillor Lester. So Lester, are you able to hear us? Yes, you flashed up there. There we go. Yeah, Councillor Lester.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm having such difficulty today. Apologies. Yes, in principle, obviously anything to help businesses and the council be on the front foot in helping businesses, we would welcome that approach, absolutely. And we agree that further research needs to be done. Obviously, the cost of the
Frozen for a moment. We've done quite well with you so far, Councillor Lester. Yeah, you're back, I think.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, thank you, sorry. I'll be brief. The cost of the research looking into the matter is obviously a cost, and of is when we were at the scrutiny committee and we were talking about what the council know when small businesses, is that if this research looking into the matter further, so it could be that we just don't go ahead with it, but I would like to hope that the council can get some information to help understand businesses out of this expense to gather more information. So I suppose it's a question for the 151 officer, but can this money be used in a way to gather that intelligence so that if the project isn't followed through in the way that it's envisaged, at least it hasn't been money spent for no real purpose with nothing to show for it at the end of it, if you see what I mean. Thank you.
Is that a question you want to?
So I'm very happy to respond to that. Thanks, Solicitor. We will have a body of evidence to understand about what our business community, their needs and aspirations and wants. So if that turns out that the need isn't for this type of finance, we will identify what their needs are. So that will enable the council to consider how it supports those businesses. So it's a point well made, and it will be an output of this process.
Thank you. Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, I'm still here, Leader. Job creation. I know that you and I have mentioned this many times, and small businesses, everything starts in a small way and grows. But there hasn't been much growth or much promise within the county for quite some time. So what I strongly believe that we must get behind small businesses and help them in every way possible. And I don't think there's been much action or activity taken during this administration or the latter part of the previous one to progress that. I know it's been difficult times and the finances have been very tight, but it's going to be extremely difficult to bring in employment opportunities. And I would like to ask Councillor Harrington, does he agree with me, not only infrastructure improvements, but general transport improvements generally? Until we get something like that in place, nothing much is going to move. Could Councillor Harrington answer that question for me?
Sorry, what was the question again, Councillor Matthews?
Yeah, I said until we get a sound infrastructure policy in place and get our public services, transport and our cycleways and everything moving, until we get that in place,
yeah,
the county is going to move much in any shape. So does he agree that infrastructure in particular is vital to get that moving before we can get the county growing?
I do agree, but I don't think it's the only thing, and there are other things that we can do alongside that. So yes, it's obviously an important aspect, a very important aspect of that.
Okay, Councillor Fagan.
Thank you. Yes, the Green Group think that this is a good idea to explore how the council can be an economic enabler and how we can support businesses to build a robust green economy that supports the environment as well as our businesses. Just like to point out that today is actually Earth Overshoot Day, and it's the day on which we have already consumed more than the planet can regenerate. So I think that we need to ensure that whatever investment we support in the county actually bears in mind the sort of very vulnerable position where that we sort of hold alongside our environment, and ensure that the businesses we support are fully aware of that and working towards the same objectives as us. Thank you.
Councillor Jim. You've already had.
Very kind to give me a second opportunity, but
Okay. I mean, it's an interesting debate that Councillor Matthews could develop, or we could develop, over how jobs are created. And we are in a or we're still in the middle of COVID. It'll be interesting to see as things move forward, how jobs are created. I think I think personally we're in a very good position in many ways in Herefordshire, having so many small businesses that we're already established, so people can have small units which they operate from, or work from home and that kind of thing. We're not reliant upon the Rolls Royces or the JCBs with their huge factories, which could be here today and gone tomorrow. So I think it's just an interesting economic time for us. I don't know whether Councillor Harvey, you want to sum up?
Well, I mean, I'd just like to, respond to Councillor Matthews. I don't like to hear councillors talking down the growth and success of our small businesses across Herefordshire. As you say, we do have many small businesses, but they thrive. The statistics show that we are slower in terms of business startup generation in Herefordshire than is the national average. But those businesses, once started, are more successful at growing and continuing than is the national average. Just to sort of highlight a few things that we've been doing. We've been, unlike the last administration, we've been investing in tourism and the visitor economy, recognising the importance that it plays in the overall economy of Herefordshire. During COVID, we've channeled millions of pounds into businesses through COVID grant scheme, and done that very quickly. We've provided additional support to businesses that didn't qualify for that with discretionary grant funding. Only last month, we approved a significant fund for COVID recovery projects, and we are investing over £20 million in the economic development in the market towns. That's just off the top of my head. So I think we're, given the extent to which COVID's taken up the last 18 months, I think we're doing what we can. We can always do better. And I'm sure, he won't be slow in coming forward with lots of excellent ideas from his group to put in the pot and work as part of the bigger team.
I'm surprised, Councillor Harvey, that you hadn't noticed that the true independents and the independents as they were before have always been the true champions of small businesses. They consult us far more than I assume they consult you at present. We've always worked very closely with them, and we've got numerous respect from both sides. And do bear in mind that if it wasn't for my hard work, you wouldn't be sitting in that chair today. So don't get too cocky in your position. Thank you.
Well, I think thank you for that. I think we'll move on to the recommendation, which is that a cabinet approve further investigation into the establishment of a recovery and investment fund to support Herefordshire's business post COVID-19. Second, that cabinet approve the principles and objectives of the investment for a Herefordshire Recovery and Investment Fund as detailed in paragraph 13. And thirdly, cabinet authorises the acting deputy chief executive, chief finance officer to develop the scheme details based on the principles set out within this report and report back with the final proposals. All those in favour? Thank you very much. So we now move on to the final item. 20 past 4, so we're doing pretty well, I think. So this is the report into the allocated use of the climate reserve. Councillor Chowns presents her considerable apologies for not being able to present this item, something which she has been very keen on developing. So her apologies for that. This is about not just climate change, but also the ecology. It's about nature. If you go through the report, you'll see there are references to a new partnership, the Herefordshire Climate and Nature Partnership, and a climate and nature grant scheme. So there's money being put into various opportunities for people to work with this. And you'll find with the papers there's some terms of reference saying who will be involved in this particular project. So we're looking at as much inclusion as possible. And I note at point 35 it says that the board will reserve seats for at least 2 members under the age of 25. So I think that's a really good signal. I don't know, I was sent a YouTube clip yesterday, I think it was, of young people on the River Wye, loving what we have in our county. And I think for future generations, it's so important the young people are involved in this particular project. There are lots of good things I could bring out of this project. We have Mr. Wilmot with us on the screen. I don't know whether you would like to comment on this and take this forward before we go to other, and maybe Neil Taylor as well. Are you going to start, Neil?
Yeah, I'll kick off if you're.
Please do.
That's all right, then we'll bring Mark in if that's okay. This is quite an extensive and extremely important report, as you can tell by the number of recommendations. It's actually much more important than its title suggests, because it responds to the council's climate change emergency, and it starts to look at how we can move over the next 9 years to being carbon neutral. And it seeks to do that through forming a partnership across the entire county in climate and nature. It puts a project delivery director in place to make that happen. It importantly creates funding from the climate change reserve to put together that delivery strategy that gets us to where we need to be. There's money in there for publicity and working with communities and businesses to help us get to the target we set ourselves. Although our target is for the council, but the county is equally important. It also brings forward a scheme to deliver small grants for climate and nature work that leads us towards being a more carbon neutral county. And it's a very serious amount of work that will make a significant step towards getting us to carbon neutral and improving the nature environment in the county. And the last item, the last recommendation also resolves to bring back an annual report to Cabinet, which will be an update on what's happened, what activity has happened, and we'll look to allocate the next year's climate change reserve to keep the work going. So, Mark, anything to add?
I think you've done it very well, Neil. Thank you. Yeah, it's a really exciting piece of work. I suppose all I would comment is that as a council, we contribute, we estimate about 1% of the carbon load in the county. So we so need to influence everybody else, which is what this tries to do. I think it's a really good piece of work put together by Ben, who can't be here because he became a father today. And if you didn't know, and I've got Richard Vaughan on the call as well, who is the brains behind the report, if there's any technical questions. But I think that's all I need to say at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, open to Cabinet. Felicity.
Well, thank you. Where to start? It's a wonderful report. Really, really pleased to see this, and an excellent amount of work. So congratulations to everyone involved. I think it's important to make the point, which I think is there, but really worth stressing. We're talking about climate, we're talking about nature, but when we talk about those things, getting it right for those things means getting it right for health and the economy. That it's absolutely key to our lives, our well-being and our futures. Long-term thinking is one of the things that's been missing very often in all the planning and everything else that we do, not just locally, but nationally. But this is totally key to what we're talking about. I think more people are aware of how important this all is, but I still think that the communication, the way we get this across, the way we talk to people, the way we engage with our communities is absolutely vital that this is understood. And I really am pleased to take on board the point made and stressed about partnership. You all know that all our activity has an impact, and that's got to be the message, and that's what we've all got to take on board, long-term thinking. And in fact, just referencing back the previous item, it was really good to see the stress on those businesses having a focus on green development, social development and so on. And that's really the way it needs to be, partly for the future benefits, but also because we know it's going to cost us, absolutely massively cost us if we don't do these things in the right way. And that's been the message for a very long time. Some of you probably remember the Stern report where that point was made so strongly. If we didn't get this right now, it was going to hugely cost us in the future, and it has, and will continue to if we don't get it right beforehand. Really good to see the focus on young people. We know how much they care. We see examples of that, the one that the leaders just mentioned as being just one very small example. But of course, it's also their future. So it's really important that they have an involvement in that. Just one quick aside, very good to see the focus on retrofit. I know Councillor Chand has been very keen on this, but one thing I feel strongly about is we're still turning out houses which could be better. So we're in the future, we're still going to have to retrofit them. If we could possibly get that right from the word go, it would save us all an awful lot of money, save an awful lot of energy, waste, and be much better for people who live in those houses and have to spend money on keeping them warm and managing it. So just a little grump of mine as far as what we don't do, but I think this is fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, some really good stuff.
Thank you. Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Leader. I think, as Neil Taylor said, this is probably it is far more important than the title would suggest. There is nothing more important than the climate emergency or climate and ecological emergency that we face, not, as a country, as a world. Everything we do should be seen through the red lens of the climate emergency. This is a good way of making sure that we've got some resource to back up the sometimes glib claims or glib pledges that we've all given in the past, whatever politician colour we are. So I fully support this. I hope we can expand on it. I hope that the partnership is able to help inform the council, tracks people forward with ideas, helps us to do better, not just with our own corporate footprint, but as others have said, to actually engage, to make sure that everything we do throughout every sector in the county and in the country, we are making sure that we understand fully that everything should be seen through the climate and ecological emergency.
Thank you. I'll ask the group leaders now. First of all, Councillor Lester.
Yes, thank you. Before my internet crashes completely, yes, it's noted the initiative and the grant schemes are noted. One of the things, though, it's a considerable amount of money, of course, and I understand Mr. Willemont's point about the council's own obligations, but I think the challenge that the Conservative group would say is that whilst engagement with others in the community is really, really important to tackle any issues with regard to energy and the issues that the council and the country faces, the one thing is that there are many things that the council can do to be more energy efficient and use the right types of energy. And so the challenge would be essentially, should this money be spent more on making sure that the council are addressing certain issues? Because there's been in the last couple of years, there's been quite a lot of investment in gas at the schools. So the challenge would be, surely should this money be used to ensure that the energy systems that are being used at these schools is going to be more sustainable? And secondly, could this resource be used to address the vehicles that the council uses to ensure that they are using more sustainable forms of energy? So whilst we accept the reason for doing these things, the challenge is, could this money be used in a way to make sure that the council's own house is in order, given the scale of the challenge? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lister. Councillor Matthews. Yeah, he's dropped off. I mean, I didn't mean that. He's not online anymore. No, okay. Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, thank you. I think those of us who were either inside or outside the Shire Hall when the climate and ecological emergency was announced will hugely celebrate this, finally, that this has come to Cabinet, and it's great news. It's really fantastic. It's great news for the young people that came streaming around the corner in their hundreds and asked the council to change. So it really is a step forward. The nature strategy, I have been at a meeting where Herefordshire has been described, well, the biological data of the UK, talking about that there's been a giant Herefordshire-sized hole. So actually, I think the nature strategy and looking at our biological data and actually supporting our environment properly is long overdue, and look forward to seeing that emerge. The climate and nature partnership, I think partnership is absolutely key to how we deliver on our zero carbon ambitions. We cannot do it as a council alone. We absolutely have to engage the residents of Herefordshire, and there are some absolutely fabulous groups working really hard on this. So I think supporting those groups with a grant and enabling them to actually get on with the work that we are as a council unable to deliver will be a huge step forward as well. And of course the retrofit strategy, given that so much of our housing stock in the county is old and leaky and adding considerably to our carbon emissions, I think that the retrofit strategy is a good step forward in addressing this. So all in all, this looks at behaviour change in the county, and we really welcome it, and we express our thanks to everybody who's been involved in pushing this forward.
Thank you, Councillor Fagan. And finally, Councillor Ginman.
Thank you, Leader. Well, on behalf of the Independents for Herefordshire, I'm very pleased to see this coming forward. I noted a moment ago Councillor Leicester's concerns about the money involved, but I think against the cost of failing to understand this and taking that forward, that cost will be deemed very small beer. But whilst we must manage it, quite rightly, as he says, properly, I think the very essence of having partnership, and I'm sorry that Councillor Matthews has disappeared at the one point in time where the word partnership was going to appear. But I sincerely hope that partnership will be used, can take this forward. I look forward to seeing young people engaged in this. It's their future. It's really important that happens. Can I commend to you, whilst obviously making my own connections with farming community noted, can I commend to you the young farmers organisations, which Herefordshire is very rich in and has some extraordinarily good and able young farmers, and maybe it's the time to engage with them, because this county is one of food production and of tourism, and here we're talking about nature and climate, and we're putting them together. And those two, the food production and the climate and the tourism, are all integrally involved. So I look forward to seeing this progress.
Thank you, Councillor Ginman. Councillor Harvey.
Yes, answering some of the concerns that Councillor Lester has about the money involved and whether we should be spending it on ourselves. In looking at the recommendations and the things that we're actually suggesting the money should be spent on, this is massive pump priming activity. The way that these individual activities listed A to J combine in terms of setting a stall out, identifying strategies and directions, bringing groups together, encouraging partnership, is going to have a massively multiplying effect in terms of the gearing that will deliver in creating coherence in the community, the way that individual groups act in a coordinated fashion, the way that we can encourage others to follow recipes, to get things done locally, sharing best practice, understanding what works in one area and making sure that people have confidence that it will work for them too. Herefordshire has a head start. You know, with our natural environment, with the way that our urban centres are positioned equidistant from one another, with the city sitting at the centre of the county. We have a very sustainable structure. We have a fantastic, wonderful natural environment, amazing natural assets. Our landscape is the envy of many. We have areas of outstanding natural beauty, sites of special scientific interest, sites of special areas of conservation. We mustn't, and I hope we don't, take those for granted, but it puts us in such a privileged and advantaged position in terms of being able to protect what we have, build on that as a really strong natural asset, and understand how to develop, how to grow, how to live in the 21st century without destroying the environment around us. And we do have niche problems. We have water pollution in our rivers. As has been mentioned, we have fuel poverty and we have a housing stock with many with solid walls, making it difficult to insulate and expensive to heat. We have water management issues where we have too much of it sometimes, or we have it in the wrong place. But those are tackleable if we stand back and we develop plans and we work together, and that's what this money is about. In a sense, it isn't a very large sum of money. I wish that it was bigger. In fact, it's the dividend that we ring fence every year that we receive from the council's shared ownership of an energy company, West Midlands Energy, which trades in energy futures and works to minimise not just this council's, but Shropshire, Telford and the Wrekin councils own energy bills. And that's one of the ways in which we try and save money, but we use those dividends and ring fence them specifically to pump prime this work. But the work that we do across the council, whether it's in the school's capital investment strategy, looking at how we plan for future insulation projects, future heating projects, how we invest in our school building stock in a way which makes them sustainable and reduces their carbon footprint and their energy consumption for the future. We're doing things right the way across the council using the lens of the climate emergency and our responsibility and passion for the environment to try and make sure that we're doing every little bit of the council's work in the best way possible. And this small, relatively small sum of money each year will help to provide pump priming for the sort of projects that we can hopefully launch significant initiatives out in the community, founded on the work that we do and start doing here. So I'm really pleased that this is happening. Looking forward to it happening again next year. And one of the recommendations is that we identify every year how we're going to spend this funding and make sure that we're planning ahead to spend it wisely and well.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. The recommendations are quite long. I don't think I actually need to read them. They've been circulated beforehand. So, Cabinet has read the recommendations and you approve them. So, all those in favour, raise a hand. Thank you very much indeed. That's approved. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for getting through such a long agenda in a really quick space of time. Thank you for your help with that. I hope nobody feels they've been shortchanged. There's a good way of dealing with it. We could have waited till September to do some of these items, but we just wanted to get on with them, show things that are happening. The next scheduled meeting is not till September, Thursday the 16th of September. We look forward to meeting then again and having a very good summer. Thank you very much. So could I confirm the live stream is being stopped?